This episode is brought to you by Roundtable Group, the experts on experts. We've been connecting attorneys with experts for over 25 years. Find out more at roundtablegroup.com.
Okay, well, hello and welcome, and thank you so much for joining me today. So, Dr. Seggev, if you could please share with us background of your expertise and how that landed you into becoming an expert witness.
Well, it's a long story. I hope you have the time to listen to all of it, but let me start. I grew up in Israel. I went to university in Israel. I studied political science and sociology with the intention of becoming a diplomat. But when I was a junior, I decided that I'm not as much interested in being a diplomat. So I focused more on the sociology part. One of the courses that I took was a field sociology seminar where we were introduced. The whole class traveled to a remote location in the desert in Israel, where new immigrants were coming in right off the boat, and the ones that my team welcomed happened to be coming from the Atlas Mountains of Morocco. So they were totally strange to modern civilization. And our job was to study how they adapt to it, and how fast and what are the problems and so on. That's when I got hooked on consumer behavior. Because there are some funny stories about their adaptation, but it convinced me that this is an interesting field, that everything that I knew from political science and sociology would apply to it. So after getting my BA, I applied to a few universities in the United States to do a master's in business. And I'm proud to report that Harvard declined me, but the University of Michigan accepted me, which was good, which was terrific, actually. So I went to Michigan, I got my MBA, and I focused and concentrated on marketing and consumer behavior. Consumer behavior was not taught as a topic at Michigan. It was more of the administrative part of the MBA program of marketing. But I pursued it on my own, and I started looking at the literature. And when I finished the MBA, I decided, well, why stop here? So I approached my statistics professor, and I told him what I want to do, that I want to combine, to keep on studying and do a doctorate, and combine marketing with quantitative methods, as it was called in those days. And the professor said, I can help you there if you want me to. And I said, yeah, that's what I'm here for. And so he called his friend right away, who was the author of the book that he was using in the introductory statistics course, who was at the time, or a year before that, teaching at the University of Wisconsin, and he just moved to Syracuse. And he told him, his name was Bill Wasserman, and he told Professor Wasserman that he has this crazy student who wants to combine quantitative methods with marketing. And Syracuse was just starting a PhD program. So Bill Wasserman said, yeah, send them over. So I I sat down and I did all the applications, which was a pretty tedious process, but you have to go through it. And in the middle of the winter, and in the middle of a terrific snowstorm, I should mention that by that time I was married and had a 1-year-old or a 6-month kid, son. So we all got in the car with a U-Haul and drove in the middle of a snowstorm from Ann Arbor to Syracuse. When we got to Syracuse, there were 6 feet of snow on the ground. So that wasn't much fun, certainly not for someone like me who was used to the beaches in Israel, but got used to snow in Ann Arbor, which gets a lot of it itself. Anyway, so that's what I did at Syracuse. In the marketing department in those days, there was nobody who was interested in consumer behavior. So here again, I was on my own. But it was a very good statistics and quantitative methods and operations research department. So I sort of sucked in everything that I could. And when the time came to write a dissertation, essentially I made my own little world. And I developed a new method for measuring brand loyalty, which was a hot topic in those days. This is 1968. And I wrote the dissertation, and I wasn't any good with computers, but the dean at Syracuse was very forthcoming, and he gave me a grant of an enormous sum of $500, which I could use to hire a computer science student to do the computer work. And in those days, it was the big IBM 360 with cards. And it was open to dissertations only after midnight. So the poor guy was there at midnight to drop the cards off. And the result of it all was that my dissertation was awarded the American Marketing Association Doctoral Dissertation Award, because really it was groundbreaking, if I can say so myself. And by that time, I decided I really don't want to be a full-time academic person, because academic research didn't appeal to me as much as solving real problems. So Syracuse asked me to stay for another year because I was one of the more mature students, I guess, and there was an executive MBA program where I was teaching at. I was a teaching assistant all through my PhD program. So I stayed there for another year and then moved to New York. And that's how my career started.
Well, how did that launch you into becoming an expert witness? Did marketing brand come to you, or how did you land into that role?
Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, I wasn't terribly interested in doing academic research where you're allowed and encouraged to do sort of 1 inch at a time to add to the basis of knowledge. I was a full-time academic for my entire career, 24 years. But I taught in the afternoons. So uh, what I did was um, to get a job first with a reputable marketing research firm in New York. All my life after Syracuse was in New York City. So I got a job with a marketing research firm because I wanted to learn the trade. I wanted to learn how to do it, how to solve, to be involved with real companies and solve problems. And that's the only way to do it. And I stayed with that firm 3 years, I think. And then I wanted to learn more about how consumer behavior and advertising work together. So I resigned from that company and I worked for an ad agency. I don't know if you're too young to remember, they uh, don't squeeze the Charmin commercial. But I see you nodding, so I guess you do know about it. But that was developed by an agency called Benton and Bowles, which was a big agency at the time, doesn't exist anymore as an independent entity. So I was a, a research director at that agency for a few years. And then I decided, well, now I know enough about how to manage this business. Why don't I do it on my own? So I started a marketing research company. And a couple of years after that, an English company came to New York and was looking for a small marketing research firm. And somebody gave them my name. I don't know how and who and why. And so they bought me out and gave me, um, well, I'm ashamed to say, but they gave me a car. So, which in those days was very nice. So I did that for about 5 years. And it was going nowhere. They really weren't very intent on establishing a larger presence in the United States. But it was good experience. I really had a chance to sort of practice the trade on their penny, which was good. So I terminated my relationship with them. And I started a new company where I decided, in the meantime, I met a few people that we started working together. One was a PhD in econometrics, and the other one was a PhD in plasma science. So those were people who were similar to me from very different backgrounds, and that was the good part of it. So I started a second marketing research company. And I had that for 7 or 8 years. And then for some reason, I was attracting the Brits. Another big British company came over. This one was unknown to me, intended to be a global marketing research company. And they were interested in my company because we developed some interesting computer simulations of consumer behavior, brand management in particular. So anyway, so I sold out to them. So I was now floating with nothing to do. This story is getting longer and longer. I'm sorry, but but let me finish it. Now this is the last chapter, I promise. A friend of mine, we were faculty colleagues at Pace University, and before that, Baruch College in New York. Opened an office with his son, who was an attorney who didn't want to practice the law, and who started consulting with attorneys on marketing issues for their clients, not marketing the law office. And he was doing marketing research, and he botched up a case because he had no, I mean, he was a professor of international marketing. He had no idea of consumer behavior. So he called me in and we started talking. So that's how I got into doing litigation research. And for 3 years or so, I worked closely with this guy. And his company was doing well. Unfortunately, he got cancer and he died. He was a good friend and a good guy. From a very old family from Kansas, and with good stock, good fellow.
Yeah.
So after I finished that, I started working with him on this, and his office, his son's office, grew a little bit, and they hired one or two people. And then, for family reasons, we decided to move to Florida.
That's nice weather.
So that's where we are today. And so that was in 2005. So I started doing litigation survey research in 2003 or 4. And then when we moved to Florida, I continued to do it on my own. Set up a company called Seggev Consulting, Inc. But it's just a vehicle for me to do, the administrative vehicle to do the litigation research.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it tremendously. If you are interested, I can tell you why.
Yeah.
An academic research, when you present a new research to the faculty, for instance, they're very polite, and they say things like, "Well, Dr. Seggev, have you thought of?" And then they drop a bomb, something that you didn't consider, which is always very helpful because you can't think of everything. So to contrast that with litigation research, every rebuttal of every report that I ever wrote starts with a phrase: "Dr. Seggev's research is fatally flawed, period." And then there is a litany of things that get listed. But that's just, on the surface. The innards of it is that it's a different world. It's a combative world. And you're on your toes. And that's something that I always liked. I like to be challenged. I like to work with the smart people. And lawyers tend to be smart.
Yeah.
So that's my litigation research story.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say also, with getting your start into it, I'm sure over the years you've seen surveys adapt and change, and even just using visual aids that you might use in the courtroom has changed with the explosion of computers, right? And then
Right.
I'm curious, have you seen any trends or anything that you could share where the surveys were easier versus now it's getting a little bit more complicated? What's your impression?
Well, right. It's a good question. Thank you for asking. There are two things that I think the litigators have to understand. First of all, that research now is much easier to do than earlier because everything is done online. And when I say easier, is that I can work on my own, and one phone call takes care of the entire data collection element of the marketing research, which used to be a pain in the old days, because you had to put everything together yourself. And now, as I said, one phone call does it. Secondly, and very important to the clients, is that research is dirt cheap now compared to how it used to be. The way it works now is that the marketing research company, and there are about 5 of them that are the leaders in this field, are, or actually I should say the data companies, the data collection companies, have been funded by large funds that invest 10, 20, $30 million up front with a promise of having an open pocket that can bring in a lot more if they are successful. And they create panels. In other words, what they do is that they contact millions of people, and these panels are now 50 million consumers, or 40, or 6 million, whatever. But it's millions and millions, and they're global, the big ones. So they spend all this money up front as an investment to collect data. They call people up essentially, and they do it with emails, but it's calling people up, and ask them a couple of what we call screening questions, which is questions that are destined to classify people and put people into categories in terms of what products they use, and certainly their socioeconomic, demographic characteristics, and so on. And so when they get a call from me, and I need 400 to do a study with 400 people who must possess these qualities, and I specify what they are, they can simply go to their database and get out a random sample of, let's say, 10 times the number that I require. And then that becomes the basis for the research that I need to be done. And so the cost of doing that is minimal compared to what it used to be when you had to, to go back a generation or so, you had to go and knock on doors. After a few years, the doors wouldn't open because you were considered a criminal and a threat. But so the phone came to the rescue. So today you asked what the trends or changes. That's a major change, a major trend, which, as we can see in litigation research, had opened it up to, it had made it so inexpensive that even a litigator can use it, and even a single litigator, a single attorney office can use survey data today, can afford to use it.
Yes.
Some of them, and I got that too, are complaining that it's too expensive and their clients wouldn't pay for it, which is understandable. But that's a big change. The other big change is that we now have, obviously, the consumer behavior research as a research discipline has advanced tremendously. So now we have methodologies that are more advanced, and they can tackle all kinds of problems that 10 years ago it was difficult to do. We would consider pioneers if we touch those areas. In this context, let me complain about something. Unfortunately for someone like me, survey research in litigation is used only in two areas. It's limited to trademark infringement, intellectual property, and class action. In a class action, the majority of it deals with issues of false advertising, or let's put it more generally, a false promise made by a marketer, made by a company, whether it's in advertising and packaging or any other communication. And that's a pity. So first of all, it's nice that it penetrated in those areas. And as a scientist, I'm grateful for that. But I like to make a plea for using survey research beyond those two areas. And if you're interested and this is the right place, I can tell you what,
Yeah,
I can go into some detail about that.
Yes.
Okay. In all the cases that I've seen so far in those two areas, let's say 92.5% of those cases, the complaint is asking for injunctive relief, or an injunction. In other words, to put it in my terminology, saying, not only do I want to punish you, not only do you deserve to be punished for what you've done, but you got to promise that you'll never do it again. Why is that? Well, there is a good business reason for that. The reason is that the actions taken by business, some of them, many of them, I would say, have a long-term effect. And if you don't stop doing it tomorrow, the fact that you get punished, that the judge says, go sit in the corner for what you've already done, it could still hurt me. And so my plea is for using survey research above and beyond those two areas, where, and one of them is prescribed by law. That's the Lanham Act that regulates trademark. And then the other has become accepted over the years traditionally. That's the class action suits. So my feeling is, one of the things that I like about litigation is that the people who make the decision, whether it's jury or judge alone or the two of them combined, the legal profession refers to them as finders of fact. Now, that's a nice term to use. My contention is that there are past facts, but there are also future facts. The impact of an action taken by a company today that's found to be fraudulent, use a strong term, may have an impact that lasts over the next 5 or 10 or 15 years. And that can be determined with survey research, what would be the impact. And I think it would behoove litigators to use the power of research that we can provide today to strengthen their argument for requiring an injunction to begin with. But with proving to the court, to the finders of fact, that the other guy must stop doing what they've been doing, because not only have they affected what has already happened, but it may affect what will happen as well if they're not stopped from doing it, because the impact is cumulative over time and continues over time. If, for instance, you make a um, um, a bad product, or if you have a if a contract between two parties, two businesses, is terminated, and one that regulated the supply of ingredients by one to the other, and as a result, the product is changing, has to change, that would have an impact over time. And if they don't get stopped, that will certainly have an impact over time. My argument is strengthened by the fact that with statistics, as we practice it, we can determine the precision of a finding with as much as 95, which is the norm, or 99% if the client is ready to pay a few pennies more, and then it's pennies of precision, of accuracy. So the estimation of future facts can be as accurate as the recounting of past facts that you can measure just by counting.
A new way to do it. It'd be really interesting to see if that actually does take place, and if there keeps moving forward as the need grows.
Yeah.
How about one last story about being an expert that maybe was a learning moment for you, or something that at the time maybe you didn't recognize as a teaching moment and then later applied it yourself?
Well, there is one very fundamental that I'm sure a lot of people in my capacity have gone through. I hate to believe that it's unique to me, but in my upbringing, educational upbringing, professional upbringing, the arguments that we make are based on proven, quote unquote, facts, or established facts, established relationships, let's put it this way. And in the beginning, I was surprised that in some cases that didn't seem to matter, because and now I understand it better. The litigation process is essentially three different aspects. One is what's the law. Two is what's the precedent in this particular district. And three is, can I find something that is even marginal that can cast doubt on what the other party, the other attorney, is trying to prove. And none of that had anything to do with the matter of fact itself. And that's an important learning for me. It was, because I realized how stupid I was for a long time. I don't know if long time, but until I got it. So that means that my presentation has to take into account, and it's not easy to do, but you learn how to do it, and writing a report to cover the various angles that can be pursued by the opposing attorneys, and that requires two things. One is first the understanding of it, as I just said, but the other is that it requires a good cooperation between myself and the attorney that I'm working with, because I have to make him or her understand that I can do only a portion of the job, that still leaves him open to the other parts. And also the reverse of it, that what he does is the principal thing. What I do, what I can contribute, is strengthen the argument that he's trying to make or she's trying to.
I was going to say the report writing plays a very strong part, and conveying that information so that you can defend your position, right? And the cross-examination is very big. Well, I appreciate all your time and your stories with me today. And if there's any other last statements, let us know about being an expert witness that maybe, again, is the best part of it for you. Is there one that sticks out the most?
Well, I like what I'm doing, and it gives me the freedom to not be in an office, so on a personal level, and it until the pandemic, it gave me the opportunity to travel a lot around the country. I've been truly all over the country doing this,
Wow.
testifying and being deposed. So it's been fun, in addition to being interesting and allowing me to do what I like to do in an important environment.
Yes. Well, thank you. And it challenges you because you want to be challenged. So that continues to.
Oh, yes. That's the essence of it all. That's really the essence. Because, if you, in my business, if you have to repeat yourself all the time, that's no good.
Right. Well, thank you so much for your time and your insights, and you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, Discussions at Roundtable. Our show notes are available on our website, roundtablegroup.com. Subscribe today on Apple Podcasts or your favorite listening apps.